So as you guys know, I'm pretty hot and cold on the X-Men films. I know that a lot of people think that they have an amazing win streak, but to me personally, I think they have 2, maybe 3 great films, depending on whether or not you count Deadpool, and then the rest of them are just kind of meh or worse. So I know that everyone out there right now is praising Logan, but I gotta be honest with you, my expectations are kind of low. Just start the title card already, man. Just get the review started already. Just put up the title card. Alright, I was joking around there in the opening, but I wasn't lying when I said I have more problems with the X-Men films than most people out there, so to say that Logan is my favorite of the X-Men films wouldn't be too hard. But honestly, this is in my top 5 favorite comic book movies of all time ever. It might even be number 1. And I know that as a YouTuber, I should tease you guys and play along and make it seem like I don't know whether or not I like this film, so that way you keep watching all the way to the end. But screw that noise. This movie is amazing. This is the story of Logan, 12 years in the future, and all the mutants have died off. You can count the remaining mutants on one hand, and Logan himself has seen better days. That healing factor of his is not what it used to be. So he's hung up the costume and the identity, he's just driving a limo these days. But one day, when a woman finds him and says that she knows he's the Wolverine and she needs him to help transport a child into Canada, he has to go out on one last job. But I'm sure it's going to be fine. I mean, after all, whenever an old badass goes out on one final job, everything works out just fine. Also, I have never seen any movie ever. Now, that's a pretty simple explanation of the plot, and I've actually heard a couple people criticizing this film, saying that its plot is too basic. And I can understand that, but to the people out there with that complaint, I'd just like to say, who cares? Yes, the one final job and the escorting someone road trip storyline are pretty basic, but when you have amazing characters that are being expertly acted, which this film does, then who cares? And yes, even if the plot is basic, the story itself can still contain lots of twists and turns that will tug at your heartstrings and make you gasp all throughout, again, which this film does. Now, as I just said, the characters in here are great and the acting is amazing, and it's because of that that this film was able to play with my emotions more than any other film that I've seen this year. And I would just like to remind everyone out there, I just got done watching all the films nominated for the Oscars. That's right, aside from Lion, I saw every film nominated for Best Picture, and yet this one made me cry harder than all those other films combined. Sorry, Ryan Gosling, but hey, at least you saved jazz. So that's a thing. Wait, how's a guy opening up just some dingy bar in a cellar somewhere save jazz? There's like 9 of those on my block alone. This makes no sense. Anywho, as I was saying, I got that emotional at this film, and it is largely thanks to the amazing performances by Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart. This is easily the best performances that they've turned in these X-Men films, but it's also some of the best performances they've ever turned in their entire careers. Hugh Jackman perfectly portrays that character who has seen too much. And I don't mean that stereotypical, I've seen too much, but I still got a soft spot in me. No, this guy is gone. He perfectly captures that guy who is full of rage, but at the same time is too tired to do anything about it. And Patrick Stewart, you remember Professor X being that noble, elegant man from the previous films? Yeah, that's gone. Now, he is just your grandpa who doesn't want to take his medication. And I'm not saying that as a joke. I mean, for anybody out there who has ever had to take care of an elderly relative, yeah, you know what that's like, and he nails that. Both of these guys are brimming with energy when they need to be, but the rest of the time, they are quiet and subtle. It's amazing performances. I do not say this lightly. Both of these are Oscar award-winning performances. But it's a superhero film, so there's no way it's getting nominated. I hate this industry sometimes. And those were just the returning cast members. In this film, we also get introduced to Laura Kinney, aka X-23, aka the new Wolverine in the comics, aka that book is really good. Go ahead and pick it up at your local comic book store right now. And she's a young girl who has the same powers as Wolverine and the same, let's call them, personality quirks. by which I mean she's a walking killing machine loaded with rage. And I gotta say, for a child actor, she actually did a damn good job at this. It's one of those performances that days later I was thinking back to it, and I was even more impressed with it then than I was when I was sitting there in the theater. So, as you can tell, this is going to be one of those stories where these two unlikely allies end up forming a bond over the course of a long trip. And we've all seen movies like that, as I've seen. It's a pretty basic storyline. We've all seen those stories where the older character and the younger character go on a long trip, and at the end of the trip, they form kind of a parent-child bond with each other. It's pretty basic. We've seen it before. You're going to see it again. However, the thing that makes this one different is you have never seen that storyline with so much rage between these two characters. Yeah, there was never a point in the first hour and a half of this movie in which I did not stop and think, Wolverine might be about to throw her out of this moving car right now, and she will jump back in and slit his throat. These two characters hate each other, and not in the comical, oh, but you can tell they actually kind of like each other. No, they legit hate each other for the first hour and a half. That's what makes this different than all those other stories you've seen just like this. And I will admit that, yeah, they don't really start bonding until the final half hour of this, and I kind of would have liked it if they had had like one scene in that hour and a half long period of hate that showed the wall starting to break down a little bit, just something for the pacing purpose of this. However, that's it. I still felt the impact there at the end when they did start to bond. It did still work at me. That is really just my only complaint. Not with their relationship, I mean with this entire film. That is my only complaint. Every complaint that I had with this film was eventually resolved. Every single time in which I said, well, why is this happening? They eventually explained it. Every single time that I said, well, I don't know if I like this thing happening, it eventually had a huge payoff. And I opened up this review by saying that there are a couple of problems I have with all the X-Men films, and that's true. No matter how good the film is, all the X-Men films suffer from a couple of problems that always irk me. Until this film, which managed to break the chain. For example, every single X-Men film, no matter how good it is, there always comes that moment where they just throw mutants at you, where it is just nothing but mutants being thrown in your face, and you don't get introduced to any of them. They basically just go, here's all these random characters. You're never going to learn their name. They're basically just walking special effects, but shut up, sit back and enjoy it. You don't need them to actually be characters or to form any kind of a bond with them. And I will admit, there comes a moment in this film where they do the same. They throw a bunch of random mutants at you and don't really explain who they are. However, this is the one film where they didn't need to do that in order for me to get an emotional bond with them. This is the one film that managed to go, here's exactly how much you're going to know about them. That's all you need to know. And you know something? They're right. If I had gotten any more information, if they had stopped the film to explain who these characters were, it would have slowed the whole film down. It would have made it all just not work. Instead, it all worked. And another problem that I always have with the X-Men films is that they always had to soften Wolverine a little bit. I mean, yeah, I understand you can't really have Wolverine be full-on Wolverine in a PG-13 film, and the X-Men film should be a PG-13 film. But, I mean, for God's sakes, the dude's superpower is he stabs people. If you're going to give him a solo film, it needs to be rated R. This film is rated R, and it's a hard R rating, and they use that R rating. Language, content, violence, every single thing in here that makes Wolverine who he is, they put into this film, and they didn't shy the camera away from any of it. And this movie doesn't feel like they just gave it some fake-ass R rating just to get people talking, just for shock value. No, this film knew why it needed an R rating. It needed an R rating because that is the way to fix Wolverine. It's because the people working on this film understood this character and understood the only way to get him right was with an R rating. And just speaking of getting Wolverine right, this film fixes so much about Wolverine, it actually takes one of the dumbest things from Wolverine Origins, brings it back, and makes it work. That's how good this movie is. It makes the bad X-Men films better. Now, another complaint that I've always had with the X-Men films is that the villains tend to be kind of plastic. And I know everybody is screaming at their computer right now, what are you talking about? Magneto is one of the best on-screen supervillains we've ever gotten. Stryker was so intimidating. The Sentinels were terrifying. What do you mean they have plastic villains? Yes. Everything that you just said is absolutely accurate. I agree completely with what you said. However, those aren't the only villains that we get in these movies. Yeah, remember that first film? Remember how good Magneto was? You remember his henchmen like Toad and Sabretooth, and I'll even go with Mystique in that first film. They were just kind of there. And heck, every one of his henchmen in the third film was just kind of there. Do you remember any of them? And Stryker, wow, was that guy perfect. However, Lady Deathstrike, I don't even think she had a single line of dialogue in that film. And the Sentinels, they captured how terrifying those guys are perfectly, but everybody was making a big deal about Peter Dinklage as Bolivar Trask. I don't remember anything about Bolivar Trask from that film. Yeah, it kind of hurts to say, I'm sorry. And for everybody out there who keeps telling me how much they love First Class, pop quiz. Who's this guy? Don't tell me who he is from the comics. Don't Google him. Just based on what you saw in First Class, if you had no knowledge of the comics and you just went into it, who is that guy? Yes, the X-Men films have some good starring villains, not always, but the supporting villains tend to always just flop hard and just stand there. This one though, first off, the main villain is just the situation. It's Logan's own mortality. It's Logan not wanting to bond with others. It's the adventure itself. But yes, the actual physical villains still have personality. They're still memorable. They still have an importance to the story. And no spoilers, but there comes a moment in here in which they hint at the big villain that Wolverine will have to fight at the end of this movie, and all I could think was, dear God, don't let it be another Silver Samurai. Yeah, you remember that last Wolverine movie, The Wolverine, in which it was a touching story about Wolverine dealing with his own mortality and not wanting to bond with others, and wait, was this movie just made by the exact same guy? Okay, cool. But you remember how all of that just went out the freaking window when suddenly a giant mech samurai just showed up? They do not do that in this film. In fact, not only do they not do that, but I can't talk about it here, but in my spoiler talk, I went into full discussion about why I thought this was the best possible villain that Wolverine could face in his final movie. And that's something else that we should talk about. This is indeed Wolverine's final movie. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not stupid. I know that Fox will one day cast a new actor to be Wolverine, and they might even give him his own movie. However, this is Hugh Jackman's final time as Wolverine, and he's been that character for 17 years, so it's kind of emotional to see him go. It's kind of a big deal, and they really needed to get this right. And no spoilers, but they got it right. They nailed the ending to this movie. They absolutely stuck the landing, and it's not just a final farewell to Wolverine, it's a final farewell to the X-Men franchise. This film constantly references the previous X-Men films, and not in a wink wink nudge nudge, we talked about that movie, fan service, you remember that movie, right? No, they talk about the previous X-Men films in a way that makes you realize, wow, these characters have been through a lot, and I've been there with them. This film is a wonderful send-off to this entire franchise, and when it got to that final scene, I was bawling. That's right, call me whatever you want in the comments down below. I don't care, I'm not a robot. You make a damn good movie, I'm gonna cry at it. And speaking of that ending, you remember how after I saw X-Men Apocalypse, I said that Fox needed to give the rights back to Marvel because literally one film after they fixed their franchise, they had already wrecked it again? This film proves to me they can still make great stories with these characters. It makes me think that Fox has finally learned their lesson, and it makes me really want to know what they're going to do in the future. And that is why I give this film my score of 0 out of 10 future X-Men films. I know. Everyone out there is saying 0 future X-Men films, but you said that this film was great. You said it was perfect. Why on earth do you not want future X-Men films? Yes, it is indeed the perfect ending to this franchise, and that is why you now have to end this franchise. Seriously, Fox, do you realize what you've done here? You actually made a perfect ending to a character story. Do you know how rare that is? Just stop and think about every single other time that you have seen a character's journey come to an end, and think about how often you walked away and went, well, that was the best it could possibly have been. Never! It never freaking happens! So now if you come in here and go, yeah, but let's see what happens next, you ruined it. Do not do this. You got one of the most amazing achievements in film-going history. Do not this up. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you can't make any future mutant films. Make as many of those as you want. Make a New Mutants film, make an X-Force film, make a Cable film, make all the Deadpool sequels that you want, make a Psylocke film, make a Gambit film, make a Storm film, make a Jean Grey film, make an X-Factor Investigations film, and cast me as Jamie Madrox. I'm just throwing that out there. You have proven to me that you can make great films with these characters, but you made the perfect ending to the X-Men films, so it's time that you walk away from that. But, as I said, keep making as many other Marvel films as you want because you've proven to me that you know what you're doing. With the X-Men, at least. So that's it, everyone. That's our review of Logan. If you want to see the spoiler talk, then click right there and make sure that you follow me on Twitter and Tumblr at Professor Thorgi and let me know in the comments down below what you thought about this film. Thanks again, everyone. Come back next time.